For Chorus Collective and NYU Stern School of Business Berkeley Center for Entrepreneurship, I'm Leon Lee.
And I'm Antonio Di Meglio. This is Capital Calling, where founders step into the spotlight to face real investors, real feedback, and a real opportunity for investment.
Now, let's meet our founder.
Joining the call today is Karolina Kaylani Fedorowicz of Rift, who's putting herself and her startup on the map. She's creating geospatial technology that uses machine learning to map reality without the use of sensors. Will she answer the call? We'll find out.
But first, let's meet the investors. Karolina, capital is calling. Do you have what it takes to lock in the courtroom?
My name is Karolina. I am the co-founder and CEO of Rift Spatial Technologies.
I'm Molony Cook, COO and co-founder at Upper Echelon, angel investor that mainly focuses on B2B fintech and then represent 2 VCs in a family office.
I'm Max. I'm an angel investor, but also GP of a newly launched fund called Ghost Angels, where I invest with my fellow colleagues from Snapchat, which is where I started in big tech, and we're funding the next generation of social media and AI companies.
I'm Geinzer. I'm an investor at a fund called Commonweal, where we focus on the intersection of technology and government. We help companies that are building businesses that matter for America in partnership with government in some way.
I'd love to tell you a little bit more about what we do. But before we do that, I'd love to ask you if you have ever used in the last 24 hours anything related to GPS, Google Maps, or location technology.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, we all use it, and most of us don't actually think about the issue behind, but I guarantee you most of the businesses that work in that space feel it daily. Location is a flawed infrastructure. It does not work in signal-less environments. It will give you a precision of around 3 blocks in urban canyons, and actually, it does not give you much context either. We decided to change that by building a very precise 3D infrastructure for location, where we don't need GPS. So we provide location in GPS-denied environments. We don't require additional cameras or hardware, which makes us not only more accessible, but also a more sustainable solution. What we do is we build a machine learning model that understands how the space and surrounding look like based on how people and machines interact with it. So picture you're going somewhere, suddenly you stop walking, but the pressure suddenly changes. That's most likely an elevator. By labeling context in different environments and understanding data up until the second you lost access to it, we can predict how space looks like. Don't think about it like coordinates or mapping. It's a prediction model. It's beyond that. It's an intelligence that starts to think for itself based on the flywheel infrastructure. We have a dual market entry where we both service the commercial sector in areas such as urban mobility, tourism, and consumer, as well as defense sector, where we work on private solutions for Air Force or airplanes, private companies in defense sector. The market is actually very huge, but the problem is that a lot of industries such as augmented reality, robotics, or even areas such as digital twins in construction have been pulled back with the innovation because of the location. And we decided to change that. Currently, we are in 6 commercial pilots that we're working with. We're working with 2 NDA projects. One is a New York City federal project, and another one is a $300 million infrastructure project. And we're going through compliance stages with the Air Force and DoD, which we plan on closing by the end of this year to still be within their budgeting. Our team has a diverse background. So myself, I am more on the sales side. I've done government sales and mega enterprise sales. I've also spent 7 years in geolocation, and I'm a repeat founder. I've done that before. My other co-founders spent years in building with mega big tech companies, as well as on the defense side, and they carry the security clearances that we need. We are currently raising $1 million to deploy it in the product refinement and accuracy, compliance in cybersecurity, DoD compliance permits, and data privacy, and of course, US deployment and sales. So that's a little bit about us. So our technology is not very visual, but we've built a display of how we work. And let me present it to you. Every piece of the mesh that you're seeing is the precision point. So you will see a mesh in a second. The red means it's very close. You can see the distance on the top. And when the color turns into blue or green, we're seeing a further distance. You can also see that we capture depth.
You can see through glass too.
Yes. And that is because we measure the proximity of signal when it's available, or sensory information from pressure, altitude, etc. Of course, the precision is improving with the amount of data we have. But the current stage, we are 1 meter average and 95% accuracy and environmental prediction with the limited data we have. So that's a little bit, it's finished.
What instrument were you using to capture that? Is it just a camera?
So anything that has software capabilities we can plug into, since we are an infrastructure company. And we leverage sensory information like pressures, barometer, acceleration, gravity forces, stuff like that, and signal, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, GPS, if available. If not available, we can work without it. And then we plug that information into our local machine learning models. And those local machine models get into our global model. And that is building the flywheel model.
Yeah. Can you pick one of your kind of pilots or commercial projects right now and kind of pretend we're that customer, kind of articulate what's your ROI for us? How should I think about integrating your product? Like, walk us through that.
Okay, so a lot of our commercial pilots that we're working with, they require this technology because without it, they're losing the user experience. So one of them, for example, would be a company that have audio tours for tourism, and they need to trigger audios within certain proximities to, let's say, monuments. And they cannot use, for example, a possibility of you constantly having camera open because as a user, you don't want that. Pokemon Go was during COVID, that was allowed. Now you don't want to lose that opportunity. So having a phone in your pocket and being able to say, okay, now open your phone to experience is something that we can provide. We are also having a subscription modeling for those commercial use cases. For defense, of course, it's white label contracts. But on the subscription models, we provide you with competitive pricing because you pay us also in data. So they also save a lot on costs.
And so for other software products that might want to use this kind of thing, are you offering an API for them? Or how do you interact with other software programs in the world?
You got it exactly to the point. The core infrastructure is an SDK. You plug it into your already existing mobile app. It's a pretty easy plug-and-play solution, which we can do quickly. And you basically can start working with your already existing infrastructure. That answers your question.
Explain this to me like I'm a mid-30 consumer tech investor. Who is your like focused ICP? So you talked about a lot of different applications, even to like the one you mentioned now in terms of audio tourism, and obviously some government use cases and whatnot. But today, given the stage that you're in, where is the ICP that you're focused on, or who is that ICP?
So in the commercial sector, the ICP would be within mobile apps, games, tourism, mobility that have users walking around the cities or interacting with the cities. It could be in a car or it could be just you walking. And right now we're working mostly within gaming and tourism sector where you have consumers that you're selling to directly as a client, and they have either applications where they have to interact with scavenger hunts, have those audio visual tours, or one of our clients is, for example, a job post application where when you pass by a cafe or a restaurant that is hiring actively, you receive a notification. For us, it's an amazing client because we get to actually train the model, and for them, they actually receive the back for the user experience that they need, and they cannot have it right now without camera.
In that last one, you're saying with current technology, I'm not able to have an application that as I walk by a cafe, a coffee shop, I get a notification saying that there's a job posting available at that?
Not with enough proximity. So that could be, for example, if you use GPS, it will give you free blocks. If you ever use Google Maps and you you're in a very dense environment where there's a lot of concrete and water, you probably see it tweaking on the map. And the reason why you even see things on Google Maps is because they had cars going around the globe and mapping that space and have algorithms to fix those things. But if you're a consumer application and you have a lot of people walking around, you don't have that opportunity to slack on if it's here or if it's next to the door. And that is something that consumers do not forgive most of those clients. If you have a poor user experience, they're not going to come back.
I guess I'm curious, what is your competitive landscape, A, but also how are you building a moat without, one of the big tech companies coming out with all of the data and, bringing this infrastructure in?
That's a great question. So big companies have one big disadvantage that as a startup you can leverage. They have to go through a lot of compliance, and they also have to go through a lot of quality checks. The problem is that they might build it, but at the end of the day, it's not their core business model. And it will take them a lot of time to go through those quality checks. We can push out a product that is halfway good, and it's an infrastructure you plug in, you learn on already their data. You have an advantage of being difficult to replace. That is one area. Second is that other competitors that we have in the market that also work with machine learning, they leverage synthetic data. Location is very dynamic. And to understand space, you need organic information. And you also need an understanding of something beyond just a coordinate. You need to understand how it changes, where the signal is bouncing off, where is it absorbed, and things like that can substitute the GPS we're using right now. Right now, we are complementary, but in the future, we will be the go-to infrastructure for location.
Can you go into more detail on that? How does this beat synthetic data? Is it because things are dynamic or it's cheaper? Can you go into a little bit more detail on that?
It's not necessarily cheaper. Yes, we do not have to pay for packages, but acquiring customers is a timely manner. However, it is a lot more sustainable when it comes to competitiveness, because if you are, for example, on the battlefield in the conflict zone, having an understanding of the real situations and predicting based on the actual situations versus synthetic information is a very big differentiator, because you are in a situation where you need to predict. And if you predict wrongly based on synthetic data, you actually lose lives, for example. Yeah. So that is one example. Second is building precision. When you have dynamics and you understand how things change in the space, you can actually increase the precision up until a couple inches. With synthetic data, it becomes more difficult because it's not true data.
Mm-hmm. Can you run on the edge?
Yes. We have two separate models. The local model on hardware is on the edge.
I'm curious around how this looks with, different defense contracts and kind of the early conversations that you've been having.
So early in defense, you usually go through the R&D process where the contracts you get are, there you go, develop it for us. We're going to test in different phases. This usually takes from 6 months to actually start with the work to 2 years to actually deploy the actual product. And it depends who you're working with. If you're going with the government applications such as DoD, that would be the trajectory. With the private companies, you can basically test with them immediately and go through their quality checks. That does not mean you don't receive the funding, because they actually fund your R&D research, and that goes in phases. So the first phase would be within the 6 months, the next phase would be after the first year, and the other one would be 2 years in. And it depends, of course, which segment you're going in. And we are starting with the Air Force because there is where we see the most demand. And application into aircrafts, drones, or autonomous vehicles is something that we can immediately supply to.
So are you signing SBIRs or are you working with AFWorks? Which part of the Air Force?
So right now we're in conversations with AFRL. SBIR would be something that we would go for as well. There's a lot of different grant systems within their organization.
Maybe as a wrap up more on your background, you mentioned you had a previous company in this space, so you're clearly passionate about the geolocation space. What was that company like? Why are you passionate about this space? Why you for this kind of product? We'd love to hear just a little bit more about you.
I know I don't look like it right now, but I'm a huge nerd, and that started in my middle school, where actually what we've done with my team, and we were the youngest team to do that, is build a mini satellite that was supposed to go into the space and collect the data about the smog and how it impacts environment and your lungs. We did that with European Space Agency and the Polish Polygon. And funnily enough, the biggest problem was not building it or getting the sensor information. It was finding it after it landed. And especially in a timely manner, because location is a difficult aspect. So that was my first starting point, being like, okay, this is truly broken. Later on, I started a company where we were building, like selling slots of land that were digital, but they correlated to physical coordinates. You could put any type of content you wanted, like photos. Think of it Pokemon Go, but for your own gallery. We thought it was cool. It was a science fiction kind of experience in real world. But our clients came up to us later on. They said, look, I don't need your platform. Can I just license your location tech? And we recognized we did a mistake going to, into that direction. But then we listened for 4 months later on, being like, speaking to anyone who would talk to us, from consumer through construction, maritime. And that's how we got into the point being like, okay, defense is the immediate application, and for that we need commercial strategy for. So I would say that is why. I would say a lot of trial and error and a lot of work in geospatial data. But I definitely bring more the sales back end to my team. My co-founders are a lot smarter when it comes to code, and they're the ones to tell me you're absolutely crazy or we can do it. So I think that is the dynamics we need in our team.
And how much have you raised thus far?
We are currently in the middle of our round. We have a couple due diligence processes that we're going through for our lead investors. And we have 3 written commitments for follow-on for that round after we get our lead investor.
Amazing. How much are you raising?
$1 million.
Have you raised any capital before this?
I did. It ended up not going through, even though we already had due diligence and term sheets that we agreed on. The reason for that was the market crash during COVID. But we did raise $3 million at the time. And we're also going through a provisionary patent process where we already got our report back, which stated that it is indeed an innovation and we can go forward with our patenting. So we're securing the date right now, and our IP is also internalized.
Thank you so much for all the information. We'll see you soon.
Thank you as well. See you soon.
All right, so now it's time for the investor debrief portion of the show. So how do we feel about Karolina's pitch?
I'm really interested. I think something I wish we had a little bit more time to go into with her, or maybe I think we could have gotten some better answers on how does this create real ROI for our customers. I understand that the tech is very cool and that demo is very impressive. Kind of contested electronic warfare zones are a big thing in defense. I think what we're seeing in Ukraine right now is that if you block GPS, a lot of supposedly very smart hardware becomes very dumb very quickly. So that all makes a lot of sense to me. What I'm not quite getting is kind of the ROI and the real use case. I think similar on the consumer side. And I'd be curious to hear what you two think, given you have a lot more experience with consumer applications than I do. But I think what was missing was why this kind of technology that's being positioned as breakthrough to get you off of GPS is actually going to move the needle for a customer. So I do believe that this could be differentiated and is hard and running on the edge is especially difficult. But I think I was missing a bit of kind of why we should care so much.
To be honest, I was quite confused. I think I was really trying to put together the pieces. I've actually met Karolina at an event, and the way that she explained it to me the first time, I think I understood more than that pitch. I think for me, I really just couldn't grasp the business model, the application, but then also, where is the stickiness right now on the government side? Because I think that's what more interests me than the consumer side. But for me, I feel like I still have a lot of question marks.
So I have a question for you all, for prospective founders or people who are these early stage founders now when they're getting in front of investors. When you're just starting a company, I feel like everybody is focused on trying to maybe throw things at a wall and see what sticks, right? She's created something here. There's a great technology. She's a technical founder, right? But as we've mentioned, there's a consumer application, there's a gaming application, and there's a defense application. How do you make it work in a successful pitch to be able to showcase all of these different capabilities of your technology? Or conversely, do you think this pitch would have been better if she had focused on only one of those verticals?
I think that the right way to position it in this case would have been, here's a burning problem that defense companies face, that fighter pilots face, that audio, tour, and gaming companies all face. They are not good at doing this in-house. An audio tour company is not going to be good at figuring out things besides GPS. I buy that. So all these groups, different groups, have the same problem that is consequential to their bottom line, their ability to execute on their core premise as a business. We are good at this thing across all of these sectors. That is why we can build a kind of horizontally applicable company that has kind of this niche dominated. And so I think it's a mix of showing, A, that there's a real customer problem. And if it's across multiple use sets, then great, all the power to her. And then B, this is why a standalone company focused on that feature set can survive and thrive. That's kind of what I would want to hear, as opposed to just saying, you could go more narrow and say we're just focused on defense or just on hospitality. But I think the way she was doing it, there is a way to thread it through. It just needed to be more clear on the ROI component.
Yeah, and I think that there's also an issue that founders have, right, when they're choosing this initial market, right? Because the true reality of owning a business, right, is that you need to find customers, right? So perhaps she is finding customers in places that she doesn't see to be her long-term vision, right? Maybe the long-term vision is defense, right? But she's choosing right now to be able to do these other things like gaming and tourism because that's what's able to pay the bills. So I guess another question I would have is, to what extent should a founder prioritize those kind of short-term goals? I mean, I know everyone's personal situations are different, but to what extent should a founder prioritize those kind of initial market things that would allow them to get customers immediately versus making the pitch to become a venture scaling company and creating a long-term vision that is cohesive?
I think for her, she needs data. So anyway, it's a win-win relationship, which makes complete sense for me. I personally just think I'm concerned around the moat around her business with all of these other big players being able to come in. And for me, I wouldn't feel comfortable moving forward just with the data that I have from the pitch.
Yeah, I think my general perspective, without prescribing too much on this particular company, but just talking about more broadly for other founders too, is I think in venture capital, and this is for better or worse, you're focused less on building a business to pay the bills today, right? And finding by any means possible, I'm going to try to get any dollar I can to keep the lights on, which is why venture capital exists, is to try to fund a different business model in which you don't focus on that dollar today, but you're building for this like long-term vision, which is why it's a long-term investment that you want to see, much more long-term horizons in terms of making money so that you can focus on those long-term use cases that are going to be a much larger opportunity than being distracted in building for these, dollars today. And so it is a tricky balance. And to your point, every business has a different, circumstance. But if you're going to go after venture capital and building a venture-backed business, that would be the traditional approach, is to like actually go for the bigger fish, even if that means saying no to some short-term revenue and some short-term profit. But that's what venture capital is there for, is to fill that gap.
Yeah. So I guess I have a question about the defense landscape specifically. VC investment in defense right now is seemingly at an all-time high. Is this a bubble, or is there space for somebody like Karolina to take advantage of this wave, get her pre-seed round, and maybe fix some of the issues that you all are seeing with her business right now?
I'm going to cop out and say both things are true. There is both a bubble and there's still space. Because technology companies that can solve big problems for the American defense space have a place. There's an enormous amount of money being spent there for good reason. We need new capabilities. On the flip side, it's not like Lockheed Martin buys companies for 100x revenue the way Google might. That just does not happen. And so I think investors need to be really clear-eyed about what can yield a venture return versus will be kind of snapped up for pennies on their dollar later. And so I'd be thinking really clearly about how much would the DoD actually spend on something like this? How big is the market for locational services? It might be really big. We'd have to dig into that. But I think if Karolina's going to lean on the defense and DoD angle, she has to have some pretty concrete math of this is how much the Air Force would put into a program of record, or this is how much navigational equipment and XYZ plane category is being spent on today. Just a little bit more grounding there, which we didn't get into today, so I can't fault her on it, obviously. But I think that's the kind of rigor you need to have when sizing a defense market.
Would winning a government grant specifically for the purpose of her technology be something that puts her over the edge in terms of being able to prove out her technology in the sector?
Maybe. So SBIRs, which is the main vehicle by which the DoD funds research and development and starts to procure technology for their different branches. All SBIRs, as they're known for short, they're not created equal. Some kind of very big enterprises collect lots of SBIRs to do things, or some very like mom and pop small businesses too. And so when a venture-backed company is taking on SBIR funding, they need to show that this is actually leading them towards large-scale defense procurement. Because it doesn't necessarily mean that the DoD is going to start spending millions upon millions. It might mean they're giving 50 companies $500K and see what comes back. And so I think it can be useful kind of directional feedback from the government of, is this interesting? But it doesn't inherently mean that it'll be procured at scale. So big caveat to it.
Thank you, judges, for providing your feedback on Karolina and Rift. Now sending it to Leon, who is on hold with Karolina.
Welcome to the On-Call Room. My name is Leon of Koyos Collective. We're here with Karolina. How did you think your pitch went, Karolina?
I think it was an interesting experience to have questions real time, and I think it went pretty well.
Yeah, did you think the synergies of their thesis matched with what you had to bring and offer?
Especially Zach's. It definitely hit the golden point. So I'm happy to, see his feedback maybe in the future.
Yeah, can you explain a bit more about the government and the military contract, the Air Force? Can you explain a bit more of what that is?
So what usually happens is that contracts such as AFRL, so Air Force Research Labs, they support early stage companies or innovative products with R&D funding. And they, for example, tell you, we need this and this and this. We will sponsor it. Please deliver. That is something that we are currently going through compliance with, where we would like to produce a personalized, customized, and privatized solution for them. Because, of course, commercial use cases are different than military ones.
In terms of the macro sense, how do you prevent yourself from spreading too thin? And from an investor point of view, how do you convey or sell your product to those investors without confusing from vertical to vertical, industry to industry in that sense?
Great question. The 4 months when we spent talking with anyone who would actually speak to us, we understood that location is a very vast problem, from mobile apps through infrastructure, through construction, logistics, defense, and list goes on. We decided to choose the two that have the most strategic outcome. Defense, of course, the biggest inbound interest, and biggest tolerance for R&D. And commercial to supply the defense-grade precision with data. Now, how we would like to prevent spreading ourselves thin is having a dual support within our team. There's people in my team who are purely focused on defense applications, and there's people who would be purely focused on commercial applications. And we would like to avoid even running after shiny objects in, for example, construction or logistics in any near term. Another way how we would like to make sure that we do not spread ourselves thin is to make it possible to implement our SDK in a very plug-and-play solution to consumers when they don't need a lot of our support. And that is how we usually do it with smaller developers or smaller companies. They just take that code and plug it in with their development teams instead of us putting the resource into it.
And to close off, we know that, currently defense is heavily funded. We see Anduril, Palmer Luckey, founders of sorts. That is your long-term vision. Can you explain a bit more? What other visions do you have for, is military the only long-term play here? Or what do you think if you could share what your vision is for the long term?
I like to think of Rift as internet itself, a foundation for spatial computing in any scope that needs location. And right now we don't think about the infrastructure underneath the mobile apps or location experiences that you're having. So Rift is beyond military. Military is a great first step for research, design, but also immediate need. But after speaking to the market, we recognize that the needs are from augmented reality, wearables, construction, logistics, maritime, commercial aircrafts, autonomous vehicles. The list goes on and on and on. Right now we focus on the areas we can reach immediately, but the long-standing goal is to become the go-to backbone for anything related to spatial computing.
Those are great aspirations, and I wish you best of luck. Thank you for joining us, and I'll call back to the studio.
Well, nice to see you again. Before we go further, I just wanted to clarify that we are a B2B business purely. So even the consumers that are using our infrastructure, we only interact with through our clients. And the vision that we are currently having is beyond military or defense purposes and commercial sector. It's rather becoming a backbone for everything related to spatial computing. Think of us, the internet, but for spatial interactions.
Karolina, I really appreciate your pitch. I love supporting female founders. Unfortunately, it's not a fit for my investment thesis, nor would I be able to provide you any value. And I really want to be able to support you in any way I can, whether that's a connection. I think I can connect you to this fund. It's not a fit for you as they only invest in veterans, but I think it would be a really great opportunity for you to be able to get feedback on your pitch. I think there's a few pieces that were missing in your pitch for me to be able to fully grasp it. But then again, I don't come from your industry or really understand your market.
Thank you for your feedback.
Yeah, Karolina, on my end, is not an area that I grasp or invest in. So I think, unfortunately, not a fit from that perspective. And I wish I could understand it better. I have some experience with location-based services, given my experience at Snap and specifically in spatial computing and augmented reality. So I thought I would have a better understanding of the product, and unfortunately, I didn't fully grasp and don't think it's a space for me. I do very little in terms of infrastructure investing. So, but wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
Hi. Here's my thinking. I'd love to talk more and get to understand the product better for the sake of just kind of general feedback on the pitch. With that being said, I think you could have articulated why this matters so much a little bit more clearly, because as you did point out, losing GPS connectivity is a matter of life and death for folks, especially in the defense world. But I think one thing I didn't quite get from your pitch is kind of why an internet for spatial computing is so critical to bridge that gap. Like, that is a fantastic big picture sentence. I couldn't quite get to what it does. Now, I'm intuitively able to kind of bridge the gap because of some familiarity with the space, but I think in future pitches that'll be really important. I think another thing to think about is articulating why dual use is the right framework here. Like, what can selling to the government and powering drones or planes, how can that effectively help you sell into the consumer market, or the other way around? Like, how do the two relate to each other, as opposed to just being able to kind of do two things at once? So that's general feedback on the pitch. But all that being said, I would love to learn more and get to know you better.
All right. Thank you for your feedback.
Great to meet you.
That's it from us from the studio, but don't hang up just yet.
We'll be calling Karolina back in just a few weeks.
A special thanks to the New York University Stern School of Business's Berkeley Center for Entrepreneurship team for making this production possible. Be sure to follow and subscribe so you don't miss future episodes of Capital Calling. Disclaimer, the Capital Calling podcast and any related media properties produced by Coas Collective are provided solely for informational and educational purposes. Nothing presented in this episode should be construed as an offer to sell or a solicitation of an offer to buy any securities, investments, or financial products. Coas Collective does not provide investment advice, and all opinions expressed are those of the hosts or guests at the time of recording.